Alrighty, traders, welcome back. Kyle Williams here. March recap. What is it? April 7th. So a little bit late, guys. Sorry. I had quite a busy week. I was out of town. Went to go see the Final Four for March Madness. That was a fantastic time. Unfortunately, my favorite team, San Diego State, did not win, but they got second. Quite an epic season for them. Never have gotten that far at all, so it was time well spent. However, that is why this video is coming out a week or so late. But anyways, let's get right to it. Just over $100,000, $100,000 and $742.63. Super happy and just, I guess, content is the word you could say, satisfied with this month. Again, nothing crazy, nothing huge. Plenty of days where I actually didn't trade towards the end of the month. The second to last week was actually quite slow. But really, the first week was really a large portion, and then just consistent weeks after that, right? Nothing not traumatic, nothing spectacular, but let's just go through it. A lot of standard single wins, along with maybe a few big wins to just come out to the six-figure month, right? I was just thinking about this, if I could have a six-figure month every month for the rest of my life, right, in this idealistic world, right, that's $1.2 million a year. That is that is the top 1% of the 1%. That is amazing. And so it's easy to lose sight of, if you've been trading a long time or are profitable as long as I've been, it's easy to lose sight of how much money that is in the real world, right? From a trading perspective or from a video game perspective, it's easy to be like, oh, 100 grand, well, I've done that before. Like, when's my next new biggest month? Or when's the next new level of my trading going to come in terms of performance, right? But the reality is, being as consistent as I've been and keeping it around the high fives, low six-figure mark, every time I have a really good solid month is fantastic. I have to remind myself of that. And so six figures, just over, is awesome. Like I said, I'm super satisfied, super happy with this month. So let's just jump right in. The first week here, we had LHDXQ. Now, I'm actually not going to go over this trade too much in detail because this video is coming out on April 7th, on April 8th, 9th. On April 10th, Clover Trading's YouTube channel will release a video of me going over this trade and solely over this trade in detail. So I'm going to put their YouTube channel in the description down below here. Go click their link, go like and subscribe to their channel. I have a video coming out just in detail about this trade. Ultimately ended up making like 50 or 60 grand, hence why that you see that here on the 3rd. But yeah, just again, super huge overdone kind of runner, was going bankrupt. It actually is bankrupt now, right? It's got the Q at the end, so they followed through on their bankruptcy to go into the OTC market. And I made a lot of money shorting it pretty much in the above $1 and covering it down below here in the 40s, 50 cents range. So much more detail to come in that video. Stay tuned for that. That will come out in 3 days from the time of this recording currently. Moving on into week 2. Really, there's a lot of action that happened this week, even though it actually was one of my lower profitable weeks. A lot happened, and actually this could have been a very profitable week if it had not been for the 9th and 10th, and I'll show you why, because even though I only lost 4 grand and 3 grand here, I actually could have lost much more given the losses that I did take this day. My biggest loss of the month, just under 10 grand was, I believe, on the 9th or 10th. So yeah, let's get into that. So on the 7th, I believe we had TRKA. Now, TRKA, I actually, even though I made money on this, I didn't really do too well. This thing, its first red day was immensely bigger than I ever expected, right? We opened at 92 cents, and by the end of the day, in the close, we're at 55 cents. Just way, way lower than I would ever would expected. And so this kind of daily chart I like a lot. Now, if you've followed me for a long time on this channel, I love overextended stocks, right? I love stocks that are gone on multiple green day runs. However, this one is a little bit choppier, right? It had 2 green days in a row, then a red day, then 2 green days in a row, then a red day. So it really never got that speed up until we were at this final day on March 6th, and then this huge gap up on March 7th. So it still wasn't that great, but it was now speeding up to the point where okay, a red day is going to come out of this. It's worth shorting. Now, granted, did I think it was going to have a red day of, call it 30, 40% to the downside? No. I thought maybe best case we would see the 70s, given the fact that we were gapping up so high. Now, if we only gapped up to like the 70s, yeah, I would have easily expected, okay, we should go down at least to 60, maybe the high 50s. But because we gapped up so much, I've just seen it in the past where stocks that maybe are gapping up a ton, it takes a lot for them to really sell off hard red after selling off so much, right? It doesn't really matter how much something is like red or green in the day. The point is like if something sells off so much, eventually there's going to be some kind of bounce given in the intraday action. And so I thought that bounce was going to come way sooner than it did. Turns out it actually died a lot way sooner. So let's actually go into the intraday here. Let's go into the March 7th. Let's do a little custom date here. So as you can see, I mean, red-green was, I believe it was like 70-something, right? As we looked at the daily chart, and I'll bring up my trades on it in a second here so you can see. But I really thought that this was going to maybe pull, like I said, to the 70s and then just chop around all day. I thought it was going to do a lot of choppiness between the 80s and 90s. And then the next day after that was going to be a solid first red day, 20-30% panic, right? And I only thought that because it gapped up so much. I just did not expect it to lose so much of its gains so quickly. And so if you look at my trades here, you can see here where I covered. I covered with that thesis of like, okay, it's going to bounce eventually. It's going to chop in the 80, 90 cent range. I cover in the low 80s and miss this complete panic from, call it 83 all the way down to 50, essentially. Just completely miss it. I went entirely flat on the short here. And so to miss that, I definitely was frustrated. I definitely was kind of caught off guard. I was like, what am I missing here? Turns out they actually had a very large amount of dilution. It's what I get for not really doing my due diligence. And a lot of times, people ask all the time, do you look at dilution every time you find a ticker? No, because it takes too much time out of my process in the morning, as well as the fact that I just kind of assume the worst out of these things. I just assume they're guilty until proven innocent. So if there's dilution in the stock, then it's just kind of a icing on the cake, right? I'm already looking to short it because it's extended in the first place. Here, I just completely underestimated the level of destruction it could have, right? And so once it did die, I knew, okay, any kind of bounce, this is so backside now that it should offer a really good short. And the good part is that it actually did offer a great bounce. I mean, pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 or 9 minutes of just straight green from 50 to 75. That's a whole 50% bounce in 10 minutes. Let alone it was right into the red-green level, I believe, right? Right. Red-green level 76. It goes right up into 75, 76 area. So I'm shorting into this. I'm covering into the pull. Again, unfortunately, no one even lower below that. I thought this panic was so severe that this was going to maybe trade it up and down again, maybe test red-green midday. Forget that idea, right? It never even touched a VWAP ever again, right? I mean, it literally never touched it the entire day. And then even by the end of the day, we were down at 33 cents. So quite ugly. I believe the daily chart on Stock Trader was actually inaccurate, right? It looked like it closed at that was after hours, right? So it did actually close at 55 cents, but by after hours, it was down to 33. Just complete destruction. Again, and I just underestimated it. But again, I still made $7,000 after I made like $2 or $3,000 here and then another $3,000 or $4,000 there, ultimately leading to $7,000 in the day. So I will take it. I'm still happy about making money on it, but at the end of the day, had I actually held this size here and never covered here, or maybe just covered a tenth, like paid myself, and then covered it all into here, and then we shorted the bounce, we would easily be talking a 15 to 20 grand day. So, again, not so much about the money, but just about like the performance of it all. Could have done a little bit better, but it's okay. I also just did not expect it to panic that so hard down to 50 cents. So that's that. The next couple of trades here, let's keep going, is SI. So then we're getting into the 9th and 10th here. SI is one of the bankrupt stocks that has pretty much given up. They had come out and said, instead of a lot of these banking stocks that we've seen in the banking crisis of trying to fight to stay alive or try to, again, continue business as usual in a more healthy manner, SI has come out and just said, yep, we're going to pretty much give up. We're going to not even file bankruptcy. We're just kind of we're going to liquidate the business, give everyone their money back, and just stop. And so when that comes out, there's no actual setup here per se, but there is just the odds. I'm like, okay, they're literally telling you they're giving up. Where do you think the stock price is going to go over the next 2-3 months, right? And this is when it's in the $5. It's like in hindsight, it should have been easy that I should have just got short and swung it down to $1 where it is now. And so I didn't really want to swing it, but I did want to continually try to just short certain pops throughout the day. And I believe here on one of these days, it actually might have been the 9th here. Yeah, the 9th and 10th, again, were the days I took some losses. You can see here that very slightly that there was this huge wick. It doesn't look big, right? But I mean, it went from 3 all the way as high as 420. I got caught in this. I got kind of stubborn, just did not expect that kind of bounce to do so or to go so much. Again, if we go into that day, go to March 9th. Yeah, I just did not expect it to have not only 1, 2, but 3 waves to a new high and then finally die, right? It just kind of a pain in the butt. I imagine there were some short sellers beyond just myself kind of pushing this thing up. Otherwise, I really don't know why else it would have had this kind of a bounce, only to finally get crushed and then again in days following go all the way down to a $1.50. And so looking at my trades here, I just got chopped up. If you look at here. And I had a lot of conviction, right? I was kind of patient. I did maybe start in too big a size here with a lot of different entries, but I added into this pop, was really just, these were great entries, pretty much right at the highs. And after failing twice, I'm like, okay, like this is where we start to roll over. And again, it just held, right? It really did not retest VUF besides this one little pullback, and then just kept going. And at some point I just said, nope, I've had enough. I'm covering, and I do avoid this squeeze higher. But unfortunately, I was just too aggressive here and lost like $9,000 or so. Now, the good part is that in this account, I was done trading. I was like, I'm stopping. I'm done. I don't need to lose any more than I already have on this ticker. However, I couldn't help but, again, ignoring the money, ignoring the fact that I screwed up, I couldn't help but see this action here midday and think, whatever thesis I had here, it's only better up here. It's a tighter risk to red green. It's midday, which usually is a good kind of place to enter. I guess opposite of where you're going, right? If a stock is sold off a ton, midday is the time for usually for it to have a bounce. If it's spiked a lot, it's usually time for a pullback. And so, like I said, this is kind of moved up all day into midday. Now is kind of a time for some kind of trend reversal. And so I ended up doing that. We close out this trade. I ended up taking it at a different broker, and I just timed it so much better because I was just patient, right? And again, there's no way to tell in hindsight that I should have waited and not shorted any here in the other in my other account, and then I'll shorted it all at this account. I genuinely thought it was never going to get here, but the fact that it did allowed me to just get a much better entry, and I ended up covering it all into this dip, making back about 2/3 of that 9K loss. I ended up losing only 3K on the day, which is good, but again, oddly enough, it ends up giving all the gains back. I mean, a full round trip. I mean, practically closing below where it opened. Would have been nice had I just traded a little bit better and caught some of this move. But again, very tough. I just did not also expect this bounce to come back. I thought it would have maybe traded sideways here and then died. So when it bounced like that's why you see me cover the rest here. I'm just like, I just do not need this to bounce back and go back above 4 for me or on me. Turns out it didn't. But again, this sticker's always been tough, and I've really never made much good money on this. I've had a pretty tough time reading it. And so it is what it is. That's that. The next was FRC. Again, so on the trend of the banking crisis, this is when, again, the beginning of March 9th and 10th here is when the banking crisis really kind of took hold of the markets, took the market's audience. And this is when a bunch of stocks started getting crushed. And so FRC, I really screwed this one up because I ultimately was right in the thesis, but the trade plan and how I approached it was so bad. And even just thinking about it, I'm still frustrated with it because I remember telling myself, don't do X, Y, and Z. And what I do, X, Y, and Z. So let's go into the trade here on March 10th. I literally remember telling myself when I saw this panic. So again, out the open, we just get crushed, right? We open up at 70, we're down to 45 within within the first 15 minutes, right? And I remember telling myself, I'm like, okay, this is gonna bounce. It might not bounce very much, right? We saw other bank stocks like Silicon Valley Bank bounce a little bit, but then continue to get crushed. And so my thinking was like, okay, once this bounces and stops bouncing, there's going to be some kind of pullback. I don't know how big of a pullback, but if I can just be patient and get in at the roundabout, or at least a decent average around the top of the bounce, I'm going to be able to profit on a pullback. And so what do? I literally short like the second halt out, like right here. Again, I still can't wrap my head around what I was doing or what I was thinking as to why on earth I would enter here. Again, let's look at the trades. because I remember telling myself, wait, like be overly patient. I always say I'd rather be late and right than early and wrong. I want to make sure I'm super, super, again, just late on it, right? I'd rather get a decent entry and be right than trying to get a super early one and be wrong. And this was absurdly early, like disgustingly early. What I still can't, again, I've already said it, I'm going to be a broken record here. I still can't wrap my head around what I was thinking as to why I took an entry here. And so immediately I covered, right, right at the next halt, lost like 6 or 7K right off the bat, just like in an instant. And again, I can't explain it as to why I went against my trade plan so quickly. It was so weird. Like, I don't know if it was FOMO. I don't know if I saw something in the tape to think that it was just going to be a fake out bounce and go lower, but I just took a loss very quickly, being overly eager to not follow my trade plan. Finally, I actually follow my trade plan, which is kind of getting short, finding a good spot here in this bounce. We do get this pullback. I do make some money back here, ultimately then cover break even there. Again, after all said and done, I think, again, it looks like a couple of paper cut losses there. I ended up being down $9,000. All right, so not my favorite, not something I wanted to do. And because I just got so in my head about screwing it up so poorly, let alone giving back any profit I had from that initial pull here, I didn't even think about shorting a red green. And this couldn't have been a better risk reward trade. I mean, it perfectly held red green. You could have got less than 50 cents a share of risk, and ultimately you literally ended up getting well over $20 a share of downside. I mean, it really couldn't have been better, but I had just exhausted myself too much from being so overly poor in following my trade plan. Just completely missed this move here. So that's that. Lost, again, $9,000 or so there. The only reason why, again, the 9th ended up not being so bad because, again, I made some money back on SSI or on SI. Whole reason why the 10th wasn't a $9,000 loss was because I actually made some money on NLST. NLST was a really, really great first red day. Again, similar to TRKA, I ended up covering way too early. However, I also had to be traveling that day, so there really was no way to have been there for it. Again, if we go into the 10th, let's just try to go to the intraday, see if we fit the whole thing. I'm sure we will. Right, so here we go. So again, like you saw on the daily chart, multiple green days in a row, overextended, and so now I'm looking for that first green day, right? And so it actually was quite choppy. We went red out the open, which is great, but we actually had a test back to the highs, right into this resistance from the previous day, held just under $4, chopped around a little bit more, and then finally midday into late day, we finally get that harsh pull and go much lower. I mean, we pull from practically, call it 380 all the way down to 250. Just a very, very hard red day that I just did not expect. And you can see that by going into my trades here. Did a great job, right? Didn't get stopped out, didn't get wigged out. I was risking the previous day's highs, let alone $4 worst case. So the fact that we didn't break 4, I was never going to cover. That was part of my trade plan. I followed that really, really well. Added as we started going sideways, looking like we were eventually going to roll over. And again, looking at the chart in hindsight, I can't believe I just covered so early. Covered in the low 3s. I thought 3 was best case, but again, I actually had to leave for the airport around by the time in this area. So maybe at best, if I was covering, say from my phone or had wish orders in there, keeping an eye on it, I would have gotten down to $3, and then it goes a whole other 50 cents lower. So even covering early, I still made $7,500, which again made a cushion, made some losses back. Hence why I'm down 3K on the day or so. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad I made some money there. It went much lower than I expected. Again, similar to TKRA, had I held for, I'm not looking to time the bottom, but had I held for maybe 280s, right? This panic low, covered in maybe the 280s, 290s, could have been 12, 15K trade. So again, from a performance standpoint, left money on the table, but it's not the end of the world. You're never going to really go broke locking in profits. So didn't lock in the most, but locked in enough per se. So, and now we're actually fading lower, which is sad. I actually thought this was going to go much higher, but that's that. That's pretty much that for the second week. The third week here, nothing too special other than UNCY. And so UNCY here, I actually traded live at the first Clover Trading Bootcamp. Thanks so much for those who went. It went probably the best I could have expected. It was incredible. We got a lot of awesome feedback. Me and the Clovers are very excited to host the next one coming later this year. But anyways, this kind of again, overextended run up, right? We've gone 3 days now from practically the 130s, 140s, all the way up to 290s in 3 days. It's not the most extended for me, but it's extended enough that I have to trust the odds that there is a red day coming. And so I actually made money both on the 13th and the 14th. The 14th actually ended up bouncing really strongly back, but in the morning it offered a great first red day kind of sell-off. And so if we go into the intraday here, we had 2 days live trading. We had the main live trading day for all the attendees, and then we had a second live trading day for the VIP ticket holders. And so during the actual conference or the actual boot camp on the first day, I got short this live, and my computer was locked up at the screen. Let's look at it here. And so I remember saying, I said, and this is how I treat most overextending gap downs, right? we're overextended. We're from 130s to about 3. And we're gapping down for the first time. Every day we were gapping up. Today we're gapping down. And the previous close looks like it was like 268, 269. We open at 240-ish per se. We're gapping down a full 10%. And that is not something and not an area I like to get short. I definitely don't like risking 10% to make 10%. That's a 1-to-1 over time. Just not a great risk reward scenario. And so I told myself, and I told everyone at the conference, like, I need a spike. I need to get a better risk reward entry. I need to get closer and as close to red green as possible. Now, I did start in. Unfortunately, I never added. That's my one critique about this trade, is that eventually, once we kind of pulled here and maybe this last bounce before it actually really pulled, or maybe even getting in at some of these bounces right here, I should have been looking to add. Mainly because at worst case, I was risking maybe 1,500, 1,300 or so just on this starter, when I really should have been risking $3 to $4 grand. So I should have been probably double, if not 1.5 times or 2.5 times more size than I actually had here. Ended up covering near, again, when it was at low a day, and then when it broke low a day, went a little bit lower, but not too worried about that. I still made like $3 grand or so on it. And again, if I had double or 2.5 times the size, should have been a 6 to 7K win or so. Again, not going to knock making $3 grand, but again, given how good the setup actually ended up working, not adding more was the biggest critique I have for it. So, but did trade it live, made some money, so that was cool. Then the very next day, again, I'm looking for a second red day. Most first red days do lead to a second, not always. It is a little bit lesser and lower of odds than a first red day, but nonetheless, I look for it, right? It is still something I've been profitable with. And so the very next day, kind of same idea. We open up, we do a spike to red green, we quickly fail. It shows that we actually can't really go red or go green strongly. I do get short into this bounce, risking that high. I do actually end up getting short more size than the actual first day. Again, I took that critique, I took that small mistake of not having enough size and actually added more on this day. And it covered, or I panicked greatly, or panicked really nicely. Covered here, I made 4,500. So I made a little bit more. Again, didn't cover the bottom, rarely ever cover the bottom, and I actually ended up avoiding this huge bounce late day. Once I covered here, I really had no intentions of reshorting. Again, I took my money in a matter of, call it 15, 30 minutes. You're never going to get easier money than that, in my opinion, on a red day like this. And so I didn't have zero intentions of reshorting. And it ultimately, this is kind of the reason why, right? The last thing I want to do is try to squeeze more like water out of a rock per se, and ultimately give all that water back, or profits in this case, right? So again, that's pretty much those days, right? 13th to 14th. I don't really remember what I traded on the 15th. Nothing really special. Ultimately, again, made 12K in the week. So again, great week. Didn't trade Thursday or Friday. Come into week 4. Also don't remember much. I remember these trades kind of being non-eventful, just kind of scalping around. Really could have just taken this week off. I mean, I took 3 days I didn't trade this week. This is when market got pretty slow for me. But the 4th week here is actually when things started to speed up a little bit, because this is when SIVBQ, again, Silicon Valley Bank, reopened. Now, if you heard me talking about this on Wine Wednesday or in my watch list in Clover Trading, I talked about numerous times, I should say, that there's going to be some kind of bounce on this. Again, I don't know where, I don't know when, but taking a stock from $280 and shutting it down and then reopening it, and if it opens anywhere, in my opinion, I was anywhere below $5. That is such a huge move to the downside that the odds of it not giving some kind of upside, maybe very short-lived, only have to be a day, 2 days, maybe an hour or so, I thought was very unlikely. I thought it was likely that we would get some kind of move up. Now, it worked out even better, the fact that it didn't open sub 5, it opened sub 1. Just absolutely obliterated, much, much lower than I expected. But again, in many cases, that's a good thing, right? Again, the lower it went, in my opinion, the higher, or at least in percent return, a bounce could go. And so what I did was I took a very, unorthodox approach. I remember telling myself, pre-market, the fact that this is so low, it's below $1, I am going to buy a very, very small position right out the open at 50 cents and pretty much risk zero, right? My risk was going to be 50 cents, right, of downside. And worst case, if I actually had to sell at $0, what would my position size be? And so I ended up buying, I believe I bought like 7,500 shares. What is that, like $3,500, $3,300? That's an average loss for me. So I was like, okay, if I throw that much money into the stock and it goes to zero, great. No big loss on my very average loss, and I opened the door to at least catching a bounce of 200% higher, right? I really thought this thing, if it was going to bounce, could easily go above 1, if not maybe to 2. As you see here, it never actually got to 2, so maybe I was a little bit too aggressive on those expectations. But what ended up happening is, it bounced right away. It bounced up to 70 cents. I was up 50% within the first 2 or 3 minutes, and I thought, wow, this is great. This is actually bouncing much quicker than I expected. Of course, that was short-lived. Pulled back down to 20 cents. And then finally, I decided to change my thesis just a little bit and said, I shouldn't have to risk zero, right? If you watch bankrupt tickers before, like they never actually go to zero. They may trade and fade off a lot, but if I were actually to sell at zero, I'd have to be holding for months. And my thesis was like, I think a certain bounce should come within a week, maybe 2 weeks max. Turns out it only took 2 days, so that was great. But if we go into my trades here, I end up actually adding to my long with the plan of now risking the low of day. And so you actually see me take a paper cut right here. I added too quickly and it started to pull back more. I was like, I don't want to risk that. Took a small loss, but took a small loss on just the ad. I still had this size from the open. Decided to re-add one more time and then risking this 20-cent low. Maybe I was premature. I kind of wish I would have waited again until late day to let 20 cents prove it was going to hold, because really midday here I was it made my odds smaller of it working because I was so early in the day. But I just thought to myself, if that's the low, then a bounce should follow pretty shortly. And so I was actually right. It squeezed or got a good spike into the close. The next day, it took a while for it to consolidate and go sideways, but then midday, it was off to the races, right? You actually kind of see the perk in volume, lots of green candles coming in. And before you know it, we're now breaking pretty much over the 75 highs. My first sell was over those highs at 75, sold a little more or just below $1, and then sold the rest at like 118, 119. Ultimately, I ended up making I think about 50 to 60% on my money. So really, really sick. Now, granted, had I been a little more patient and not bought at 50 cents and took all my size, say in the 30s or even maybe high 20s, you got a way bigger percent return, right? You had a 300 to 400% return versus my average only a 100 to 200% return at best. So that was my only little mistake there, or maybe lack of perfectly trading it. But again, I'm never going to be perfect. I'm just glad my thesis played out pretty well and it actually bounced very high. The next day, it actually ended up going even higher. It ended up going all the way up to 140, not 170, 140. I was all out. Again, my long was over. I actually now was getting short biased, and I was kind of hoping it would go higher. Again, if you heard me say in the beginning of this thesis, I thought it could go maybe even $2. And so today, when we were gapping up, I'm like, wow, this is great. We're going to have a second strong green day. It could easily go up to $2, and then the next day would be a great short. Now, ultimately, when we started dying, we had this really harsh pull here. That thesis for me quickly changed. I thought to myself, okay, this is not nearly as strong as I liked it to be, or as would have thought it would have been. And so I started getting short. If we look here, you can see here I start getting short as it looks like it's going to break the morning low. I cover a little bit, but ultimately add that size right back. But then we start bouncing back, and I think to myself, okay, it's still, again, I don't like this move. This move here was weaker than when it should have showed or should have been. But this bouncing back is also stronger than it should be. And so I thought to myself, if this bounces back and then holds this level and say holds like 130, it's way too close to the highs of 145 that easily could just consolidate and then break out midday again like it did today or did this day. and then head our way to $2. And so that's why I did end up covering it. I covered into this bounce. I thought to myself that this is not the kind of bounce we wanted, or I wanted. And I just waited. I said, okay, let's see how this consolidates. Let's see how well this holds that 130 to view up area. Because again, like I said, if it keeps consolidating, say in this range here, it's that much more likely that it has more juice and can break out to a new high a day later in the afternoon or the late morning. Now, once we started failing, once we started going back under view up and back under 130, I thought to myself, okay, this is actually weak. Maybe short sellers or whoever just got a little bit too aggressive and then squeezed themselves out into this kind of bounce. For whatever reason, this bounce was stronger than expected, but the momentum and or strength behind it died fairly quickly. Couldn't even consolidate for more than 20, 30 minutes before actually fading back off, hence why you then see me reshorting. Now, I don't really like how I shorted this. I pretty much just kept shorting every 2 to 3 minutes and every 2 to 3 cents lower. So really, it brought my average down lower than I would have liked. My average ended up being like 115 when I just taken much bigger size up here. I could have had like a 120 average. Again, not the biggest deal, but I just a little bit unnecessary per se. Or at least could have awaited shorting these and actually tried to get these bounce highs here. Now, ultimately, I actually started losing sight of the big picture on this ticker for a second. Once it started holding red-green 3 times here, I thought to myself, like, this is not what I want to see. I thought this was going to go red right then and there. The fact that it held red-green so well, I'm like, man, if this really came back above view again and then say started consolidating it right here, again, it only further brought me back to that original thesis of like the longer and given any time that it can come back over a view up and hold it, I risk it coming back and breaking new highs and then going to $2. And so when we held red green and started chopping in here, I just really had my finger on the trigger to cover at any given moment. I was like, I do not like this. Again, I'm not going to just scare myself out. I'm not going to emotionally cover and just get out. I'm going to stick to my trade plan, but I'm not a fan of it at the moment, right? Ultimately, this just ended up being random sideways consolidation because eventually we finally fade. We finally break down. We do go red convincingly. You see this volume coming in, plenty of selling volume, and we're finally, very nice, solid red on the day. We then end up bouncing. I do end up adding a little bit of size here into red green, especially as I was holding a little triple top here. I guess I could have and should have waited for the last top attempt. I kind of shorted the first top attempt, which is usually a bit risky. This could have easily just kept going and back to view up, and then I would have regretted adding here. But I trusted it. I trusted the fact that it did go red eventually means eventually this trade does work out. I held all of it overnight. You see, I have no green candles because I didn't cover a single piece. I was pretty convicted at this point that we would go further and lower the next day, and that is what we do. Again, if we go to the chart here, we do get this little really solid panning out the open. But surprisingly, it actually ended up coming back and squeezing back, right? This was actually a pretty impressive bounce, in my opinion. I did not expect it to do that. And when it did this, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is, again, my biggest fears of it coming back when it was consolidating here. I was like, okay, this is the move where it's going to come back and break the highs and go much, much higher. Sadly, we have yet to do that. It's just been a very slow fade of death. It still could come back. I would love for it to come back and get another great run out of it. That would be awesome for both longs and shorts, in my opinion. But for now, we have not. But so in terms of my covers, I unfortunately did give money back to in short, right? Again, like I said, I just did not expect this bounce to come back so strongly, let alone even this bounce back to the new high a day from the morning open of like 90 cents. And so when we look at my trades here, do a really great job of covering it into this panic. I cover about half my size here. Unfortunately, I just got greedy. There's really no other way to say it. I just thought to myself, okay, after this bounce, it should bounce a little bit, chop around, and then head lower. I wasn't really looking for much lower. I thought I could just get maybe mid to low 60s, one more move lower, but unfortunately that just never came, right? We had a really strong bounce back. It pulled, it held the view up, and before you know it, we're back towards red-green. And I thought to myself, I can't risk giving back any more gains. The reality is my average is only 115. If I even risk back to $1, I'm going to be covering into 105, maybe even 110, and giving back all my gains, at least on the second half of the position. So I did end up covering. I actually ended up over covering by a few hundred shares, which is why you see this red candle. This is actually a small sell candle I had, just getting rid of the shares I accidentally longed. Lost like maybe $10. Really didn't make a difference onto the trade. But ultimately, had I just covered this size down here in the 70s, would have made about $6,000 more or so. So not the worst thing, but definitely frustrating when I I just should have known better. Like, why am I being greedy for, call it 10 more cents down to 60 cents at best and end up giving 20 cents back, right? The risk reward at that point wasn't worth it. And I just got too greedy. Now, I am at least glad that I actually covered, because again, had I stuck to that plan of like, okay, well, what if I risk a buck? It breaks $1, and immediately, like I said, we got 105, 110 within a minute or two. I would have given back much more gains than that. So ultimately locked in about, 16 grand on it or so. Again, locked in 16 grand on it here, locked in about 7 grand on that long from the bounce play. So overall, made really good money on this trade, or on this ticker, the last week of the month. Again, could have made a little bit more, but that's the case with pretty much every ticker I trade, if you haven't noticed that theme of this video by now. So again, still happy with it, still excited about it. The last ticker of the month here was PYXS. Again, to close out this theme of the video, what did I do here? I left money on the table. So this was also on the 31st here. Again, this was the day I covered my SIVBQ for 16 grand. I made a little bit more. I made 3 grand on PYXS. However, I did lose 3 grand on it, giving it a couple paper cuts on the days prior here. So ultimately really ended up break even on this ticker, which really is frustrating considering how just amazing of a red day this had. But again, it reminds me a lot of UNCY, right? It had a great, strong 3 green days, never went red each day. Now up from 3 up to 6, a full 100% move. I was excited about this play. I was super eager. I thought this is the kind of play that offers me 5-figure potential. I just need to be there and have the right trade plan. And like I said, the key part about my trade plan here is that it's never gone green yet, right? Gaps up, hasn't touched red green. Gaps up, hasn't gone red. So every single day it's gapped up. So the first time it goes red should be a huge trigger and trend change for me, right? It's not always like that, but in this particular case for this ticker, it's kind of giving me hints of that. And so what do I do when it goes red for the first time? I don't add or short size. Like I'm still, again, similar to the FRC example where like why I didn't trust my trade plan and short so early. I'm still looking back on this ticker and being like, what were you thinking? Like when this thing went red for the first time, why weren't you shorting? And so like just to show you the trade so you understand what I'm saying, so we are gapping down, right? We did go red pre-market technically for the first time. However, I wasn't at my computer when this happened. Now it did bounce. So I started in. I thought to myself, okay, it could come back red by the market open and could squeeze higher. So let's just start in. But if it holds red by the open or goes red by the open, I need to be adding. And so what does it do? Last few minutes right before the open, it actually comes back green. But the very first minute out of the open, this is the very first minute right here, just slams red. And again, where's my candles? Where is me adding to this position and risking the highs, risking 610, 620? Right, this pre-market high and this day high now right out of the first minute of the open. Like I've taken this kind of trade so many times, and here I am like just blindly ignoring what I'm looking at, which is the fact that it just went red on great selling volume. Okay, and instead of trying to hit the bid and slam in at $6 at $6 at $6.90 at $6.80, I'm like sitting at $5.95. Sorry, not $6.80, $5.80, $5.90. I'm like sitting on the ask at like $5.95, trying to get a better entry on my let me wait for a bounce back to red green. And again, in some cases that does work, but again, in a lot of cases, and especially in this case where our ticker has never gone red for the first time in the market open, there shouldn't have been any waiting. You could hear the frustration in my voice. I'm like, there should not have been any waiting for 2 or 3 cents better of a bounce entry. Like I should have been just hitting 590. Who cares if I get 595 or 590? Like this is it. This is the entry. This is where I get size. This is where I put on my full position. And what do? I don't do that. And it panics beautifully, right? So I end up covering the starter position in the low 5s. I thought best case it could go to like high 4s, like 480, 490. Ultimately, it's very similar to the trend of TKRA, NLST. All these tickers this month went much lower than I expected. It ended up going sub 4, let alone sub 5. So ultimately, again, left money on the table. But really, I'm not too upset about that. Like I said, what I am most upset about is just not getting the size I would have. Because even getting the size I wanted, say at 690, like I should have, covering at the low 5s still would have been a 5-figure trade. It would have just been a massively 20 or 30-figure trade had I actually covered in the low 4s per se. But again, I did not expect that. There's just no way I would have anticipated this low. However, I do think with extra size, I would have just been covering all the way down to say 480, 490, which would have led to, again, a 10, maybe even 15-figure trade $100,000 trade. Again, is what it is. It's the theme of this month of me literally just either not taking enough size or taking enough size and then covering too early and having to go 10, 20% lower. That is the theme of this month. And again, even after, and this is why I say like, you really can't be greedy in either areas. Even after all the mistakes I've shown you with being greedy or covering too early or not taking enough size, I still made $100,000. Like that's what's crazy about this and why I love trading so much is that even with all my screw ups, just sticking to the best and right setups still resulted in me making a really, really great month. You know, more money than most people make in a year, and I made it in 30 days, right? So really just couldn't be happier. It shows what I need to prove for next month. April is already off to a pretty decent start of 16 grand of the first week, which of course we'll go over in the recap next month. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Really excited how this year's gone. In terms of like just a little mid or like Q1 update of the year, this doesn't include my borrow fees, so my borrow fees are probably take me below 500K. But considering, like I said, if you watch my December recap or my whole 2022 recap, right, I only made, not only, but again, compared to previous years, right, where I killed it out of the park in 2021, 2022 was a lower profitable year for me, just under $500,000. I could theoretically stop trading for 2023 and already do better than last year. So ultimately, still a great year. I'm super excited and stoked how this year's going for only the first 3 months. Really hope this continues. And if it does, then I'm going to have a really good year. But again, there's 8 months left in the year, plenty of time left. Still need to trade well, still need to manage risk at all times, and trade well. And the profits will come after. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I will see you next month. And be sure to check out that video on Clover Trading's YouTube coming out on Monday, right? I go over LHDX in great detail. You're not going to want to miss that one. Anyways, guys, see you next time. Peace.